Today on Quickly Quantum, quantum mechanics gives us a rule that nothing can copy, the no-cloning theorem, the idea that you literally cannot make a perfect copy of an unknown quantum state. Cryptographers have spent years trying to turn that rule into a weapon, encryption where even someone who steals your ciphertext and later gets the key can't have secretly cloned it and handed a working copy to a partner. The question this week is whether that dream just grew up from a single bit of information into something you could actually use to send a message. Two papers landed within days of each other at the end of July, both trying to answer it, and this Sunday the whole episode is theirs. No headlines, just one idea, stress-tested from every angle. Welcome back to Quickly Quantum, your daily brief on the quantum frontier. It's Sunday, August 9, 2026. Let's get into it. So, let's build the picture. Back in 2020, researchers Anne Broadbent and Sebastian Lord introduced Uncloneable Encryption, UE for short. The pitch: encrypt a classical message into a quantum ciphertext, a message stored in quantum states instead of plain bits, such that even an adversary who eventually learns your decryption key can't have split that ciphertext into two copies that both decrypt correctly. Think of a secret that self-destructs the moment somebody tries to duplicate it, not because of a rule you enforce, but because physics won't allow the copy. For years, though, every real construction had a catch. Some leaned on computational assumptions, secure only as long as nobody ever builds a fast enough algorithm to break it, which is exactly the kind of promise quantum computing itself keeps threatening to void. Others worked one bit at a time, not a real message, and some leaked security by a polynomial factor. The guarantee got weaker as the message got longer, defeating the point. Then, in March of this year, that changed. A paper called The Uncloneable Bit Exists from Arkishna Bhattacharya, Anne Broadbent, and Eric Kulf proved unconditional, information theoretic, physics guaranteed, not just computer science probable, security for a single bit. No adversary, no matter how powerful, can beat a coin flip at cloning it. But the authors themselves flagged the obvious next question. Could this become useful for a real arbitrary-length message without falling back on the very computational assumptions the breakthrough escaped? Call it the graduation problem. Can unclonable encryption grow from a single bit into a real message? And two competing papers, landing within about a week of each other in late July, showed up with different answers. First up, the purists. Arkishna Bhattacharya and collaborators, same lead author as the March breakthrough, came back this time in a paper on archive and nature physics, arguing unclonability shouldn't have to compromise. Their claim? You can make the guarantee a physical fact for real messages, not just a single bit, without leaning on any assumption a future algorithm could someday break. The trick is showing the encoding bases used in the single-bit scheme are actually a subset of what's called Clifford unitaries, a specific, well-understood family of quantum operations. That observation upgrades the single-bit result into unconditional, unclonable encryption for messages of arbitrary length, with encoding time that scales only polynomially, reasonably, not explosively, with message length. In plain terms, a whole message, unclonably encrypted, with a guarantee that doesn't weaken as it grows, and that no computer, quantum or otherwise, can ever crack no matter how fast it gets. That's the strongest possible version of the promise, and a physics outlet caught the mechanism nicely. At phys.org_com posted on X, summarizing it as more quantum states are used, two interceptors' odds of both reading the hidden bit sink toward a coin flip. That's the intuition in one sentence. Throw more quantum resource at the encoding, and the ceiling on any coordinated cheating strategy drops toward pure chance. The open question this camp doesn't fully answer is what polynomial encoding time actually costs at real message sizes. Polynomial can still mean slow in practice, and a proof that something scales reasonably in theory isn't the same as a scheme you'd want running tomorrow. Now the second camp says the purists are optimizing for the wrong thing first. Seyun Raghavan, in a paper posted to the IACR's ePrint archive, argues unconditional security is a lovely ideal, but what actually matters for unclonable encryption to go anywhere is efficiency and reusability, a scheme usable more than once, in what's called the plain model, meaning no exotic, idealized assumptions baked into the proof, just standard cryptographic tools. His trade? Lean on one modest, well-motivated computational assumption instead of demanding zero. What he delivers is the first plain model, one-time, efficient, unclonable encryption scheme for a single classical bit that avoids both old failure modes. No polynomial security loss, no crushing inefficiency. And he goes further, the first plain model construction of many times secure encryption, meaning you can reuse the same key more than once for messages of arbitrary polynomial length. The catch is that it assumes the existence of what are called pseudo-random function-like states, a cryptographic building block that's plausible but not proven to exist. The mechanics are almost charmingly simple. The key is a uniformly random, non-identity, phase-free Pauli operation on however many qubits you're encoding, Pauli operators being among the most basic building blocks in quantum mechanics, implemented with operations and classical computation that both scale linearly with message size. That's the part that should catch an engineer's ear. Linear scaling is fast, not some exotic construction that only exists on paper. Raghavan's implicit argument is that a scheme nobody can actually run isn't more secure in any way that matters. It's just secure in a proof. Third camp. James Bartusek and Eli Golden, who work in a corner of the field sometimes called microcrypt, building cryptography on the absolute minimum assumptions possible, ideally nothing stronger than the existence of the unclonable bit itself. Their argument is that the real prize isn't unconditional security and it isn't raw efficiency. It's finding the weakest possible foundation many-time unclonable encryption can stand on, because the weaker the assumption, the more of cryptography survives in a worst-case world where, say, P equals NP, the famous unsolved question of whether every problem whose solution can be checked quickly can also be solved quickly. If that turned out true, most of classical cryptography would collapse, but this quantum flavor might not. Across 2 papers, they prove something tight. If many times secure symmetric key encryption exists, a standard tool most of today's internet security already assumes is fine, then many times secure unclonable encryption for arbitrary length messages also exists. And because the reverse holds too, the two are shown equivalent in strength. Neither is secretly harder to build than the other. Separately, working in what's called the Haar random oracle model, an idealized stand-in for a perfectly random quantum process, they build a scheme supporting key reuse, arbitrary length messages, and the first evidence that reusable, unclonable encryption can exist even in a world where one-way functions, one of the most basic tools in all of cryptography, might not exist at all. That's genuinely striking if it holds up outside the idealized model. It would mean unclonable encryption doesn't need cryptography's usual toolbox, just a stranger, more minimal one. But in the Haar random oracle model is exactly the caveat that matters. It's a model, not yet a machine. And then there's the camp playing defense, the impossibility result theorists, people like Prabhanjan Ananth and co-authors, whose job in this story is to keep everyone honest about what unclonability can never do. Their argument? Some versions of the dream are provably, mathematically dead, and no new construction changes that. Their prior analysis looked at a natural, simple design, a scheme that encrypts every bit of a message independently, called generalized conjugate encryption, and showed a cloning adversary using a generic strategy can still succeed with probability at least 0.71 raised to the power of a number of bits. That's nowhere near a coin flip. For a short message, that success rate is uncomfortably high. Separately, other work in this line has shown there's no indistinguishable secure unclonable encryption, and no quantum copy protection, a related idea for locking software instead of messages, for single-bit output point functions in the standard model. A point function, for the non-cryptographers, is about the simplest thing to protect. A function that fires for exactly one secret input and nothing else, like a password check. If unclonability can't be made airtight for something that simple, that's a real ceiling. The point of this camp isn't that the new papers are wrong. They're not contradicting Bhattacharya's, Raghavan's, or Bartusek and Golden's results, which are about different, more structured schemes. The point is narrower. Unclonability isn't a magic word that makes every design automatically safe just because it involves quantum states. The no-cloning theorem gives you leverage, not a blank check, and this week's optimism should be read against that backdrop. So where does this actually land? 3 legitimately different papers just answered the graduation problem the March breakthrough left hanging. Can a single unclonable bit become a real, arbitrary-length, unclonable message? And they answered it 3 different ways, which tells you the field is diversifying, not stuck. Bhattacharya's team wanted 0 assumptions and got it for one-time use. Raghavan wanted efficiency and reusability and got it for a modest assumption. Bartusek and Golden wanted the weakest possible foundation and got tight equivalence with ordinary encryption, plus a tantalizing hint that reusable, unclonable encryption might survive even without one-way functions. None of the three actually compete head-to-head. They're optimizing different variables, which is what you'd expect from a field that just cracked open a genuinely hard problem. But the prospects possibility camp's caveat is the one I keep coming back to. Unclonability is provably not a free property you get just by encrypting quantum style. Some designs, even simple ones, leave real cracks. That 0.71 to the n cloning probability isn't nothing. And the open questions here point at the same practical wall quantum key distribution hit years ago. Does statistical security for real messages survive outside a proof sketch when you try to build the ciphertext at practical size? Or does the polynomial blowup quietly become exponential in practice? Can pseudo-random function-like states or a Haar random oracle ever be swapped for something you can actually compute rather than an idealized stand-in mathematicians use to make the proof work? And even with all that solved, unclonable encryption still needs long-lived quantum memory and quantum channels to move the ciphertext around, infrastructure decades from sitting on anyone's desk. Time for the hype check. I'm putting this at a 6. The justification. 3 independent, technically serious results genuinely advanced the state-of-the-art on a real open problem within the same 2 weeks. That's a field moving, not a press release. But every one of them still lives inside a proof, an idealized model, or a one-time use limitation. And the honest comparison is quantum key distribution in its early years, a beautiful, physically real guarantee that took decades to become anything you could buy, and even now serves a narrow niche. Here's the computing tieback. If unclonable encryption ever gets efficient and reusable outside a lab, it rides on the same quantum memory and quantum networking hardware that quantum computing needs to link processors together. So every advance here quietly stress tests the same hardware quantum computing itself is racing to build. For now, this is theory doing genuinely important work, not a product roadmap. If today's deep dive into unclonable encryption scratched an itch, follow Quickly Quantum wherever you're listening, so tomorrow's headlines land in your feed automatically. And if you know someone who'd get a kick out of watching cryptographers argue about how paranoid encryption should be, send them this one. It's a good on-ramp into what quantum computing actually threatens and protects. This has been Quickly Quantum, an AI-voiced podcast created and built by a real human using today's cutting-edge technology. Nothing you heard on this show is financial advice. I'm Brian Lampert, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Take care.